We have to be relentless with the idea that the value of what it is that we're all doing is worth more than it ever has been before. You think about the value out of an MSP, it is being on top of technology. It is learning the new things. It's learning the new risks. It's finding ways to mitigate those risks. And no longer are we just resellers.
Well, good afternoon, gentlemen. A couple of guys that should probably need no introduction at this stage. Rob Ray from Pax8. Welcome, Rob.
Thank you.
Paul Lloyd. Welcome, Paul.
Good afternoon.
I've been tapped to kind of have this maybe spicy debate about pricing options.
Okay.
Let me set the stage. I think one of the things that happens is everybody thinks they've figured out the perfect pricing model, and then growth happens, and then pricing models fall apart, or then the industry changes, and some things have to kind of be reevaluated. And resistance is futile sometimes. People kind of find themselves doing the same thing over and over again. And we're also in an industry in which best practices seem to dictate everything that people do for a long time. So there's a lot of sameness, a lot of guidance from everybody saying, do this, do the other thing. And so what I'd like to ask you guys is to chime in on your thoughts around pricing models specifically. And we'll give each one of you a little bit of time to go through what you think the ideal pricing model is in today's day and age. Maybe a little bit of context and history from the pricing models we've evolved from, but maybe what's going to take us into this next evolution of the industry.
Pricing is a difficult conversation. I mean, let's be honest, there is no easy way to actually do this. And I think there's a number of factors that obviously come in. You have to look at your geo, you have to look at the verticals that you serve, you have to look at the strength of your team, you have to look at how large your end user customers are, what your desired outcome is, all these types of different things. So I think the most important part of figuring out how to price something is you have to actually understand the value of what it is that you're actually bringing, because that the pricing model is evolving. And, we've been at this for decades, and, it used to be super simple. It was like a per head, or it was like a per device, and then devices started disappearing and things started changing and evolving, and then other tools come into the actual market. So, it's something that I think you have to constantly look at. I think it's something you constantly have to review, not just what your price is, because obviously I think the prices also need to go up based on things like inflation and everything along those lines. But I think that the result of what it is that you're actually trying to do out there right now. So, if you want to look at specifics, I think smaller MSPs serving smaller SMBs can still do a per device type or per head, per person type pricing. But when you start getting into co-managed larger opportunities, more sophisticated cybersecurity sales, more needs from those actual end users, you got to evolve it to more of a, not necessarily a per outcome. I think per outcome is eventually what we're going to get to with AI. But right now it's more, how much is a peace of mind worth? I worked for Datto for 10 years, and, we started out as an average price backup product. And over the course of the years, that price went up. And a lot of times people were looking at it going, well, your price is more expensive than these other dozen backup solutions, but my peace of mind is worth more. So I think there's also looking at what that desired outcome is. What is the ultimate end user? Like, what is the value you're actually contributing to them? And then kind of pricing it backwards from that perspective.
Well, before I jump to Paul, maybe I will dig into the rabbit hole a tiny little bit on some of these ideas. Complexity is an interesting variable to pricing. And it's interesting, I think, that downstream from the MSP, the clients often are thinking about cost or price from an economies of scale perspective. Mm-hmm. And there seems to always be a disconnect between the growing complexity of a larger business, but that business also wanting, quote unquote, economies of scale and the prices to come down. And there seems to be a real sort of contentious situation there in getting that value alignment. What do you see in terms of that?
I think we got to be relentless about it. I think we shouldn't be forgiving about this. It's not a race to zero. It's not about commoditization, especially because of how much our industry has evolved. And, IT used to be simple. Here's a server, here's some desktops, here's, some laptops, and, make sure your Microsoft licensing's done and patch Tuesday or Wednesday, whatever. It used to be really, really simple. Cybersecurity has thrown all of that out the window. And now you can actually grade end users based on how secure they want to be, how much money do they want to risk, how much money do they want to spend, how critical are certain business applications or certain things that they're actually doing. And I'll give you a real world example. Like my wife runs an interior design shop, small business, 4 employees. She's now at a physical location. She wants an MSP to come in there and do that. So I call my local MSPs, friends of mine, and I'm like, hey, my wife started a business. Can you help me out? The guys I've known for like 20 years. And they're like, well, we have a per month minimum of $2,000. And I'm like, oh, there's no way she's going to pay for that. Can you help me out, friends and family? They're like, hey, I learned from you not to sacrifice. So no, here's the minimum. So she says no. And, she's struggling through it and doing it on her own. And then she goes to a conference and somebody mentions how their designs all got hacked and they lost them all. And now she comes back going, that $2,000 a month, maybe we need to actually relook at it. So again, we have to be relentless with the idea that the value of what it is that we're all doing is worth more than it ever has been before. You think about the value out of an MSP, it is being on top of technology. It is learning the new things. It's learning the new risks. It's finding ways to mitigate those risks. And no longer are we just resellers. We're not just reselling other people's stuff. We're actually adding value. We're actually managing these things. We're actually monitoring these things. And most importantly, staying on top of what's next, what's new to make sure that the end users are protected, they're taken care of, they have everything they could possibly want. The key to it is you have to mitigate it. You have to be able to explain that return on investment, the what if scenarios in order to justify why your price should go up every year and not come down.
Indeed. And this is perhaps one of those fallacies of the industry, is that is where a lot of MSPs get stuck in getting their clients to understand what some of those risks actually are. Yeah. Paul, give us a bit of your thoughts on the pricing philosophy.
I started my life with enterprise outsourcing. So I go back, way back in terms of outsourcing, which fundamentally is what the MSPs are doing today. Now, my first client was Oracle in the UK, and we did everything for them. We managed their servers, we managed their desktops, we managed their purchasing, the whole thing. And of course, the value then was taking that whole system away from them and doing it on their behalf and doing it to their rules. And it was relatively straightforward to be able to prove that value because we could do it more economically than they were doing it themselves. And then, time has gone on and developed. And I think the challenge, Rob said it really, the challenge for these people is the outsourcing sort of support scenario changes on the size of your end user. If you're working with 15 man band, then I would argue it's a commodity these days. It's a straightforward thing. If it's 50 or 150, then the dynamics of that completely change because they're more structured, they want more from it. And they need to be careful that they don't fall into the trap of, the kind of the original outsourcers in not enabling their clients to develop forwards. In the old days, IBM would come in, stop all the development, support what was there, but not do anything else because that costs them money. And that's why the thing fell apart, really in the early days. So I think that they've got to understand, and I'm absolutely adamant that these people should have some form of niche, target market, vertical, that they can add value in that market over and above the technology, because the technology is getting easier, and I don't see any reason why, certainly with AI, that the big players, the Microsofts or even potentially Facebook, don't just simply do a basic support for commodity products using AI to do it. And they've got the infrastructure. So I'm constantly trying to get these people to look beyond just supporting the technology to delivering business value. But to do that, they've got to understand the market that they're in. They've got to understand what drives an accountant, what are the accountants looking for, forwards or lawyers or whatever it happens to be, and get in that market so that they become known in that market and people will pay a premium for the brand, really. If you're branded, with Datto in the market, over time built a luxury brand almost, then people would pay a premium. And these people have got to do a similar sort of thing within, in a smaller way, but be able to actually add value in their market. Not technology is technology. It's getting easier, isn't it?
Yeah.
and it's going to disappear. That kind of basic support is going to disappear. I started enterprise security in 2005, and we had all the same issues with enterprise then as you have with SMEs today, and they've got to catch us up, haven't they? I don't believe there's enough education of the end users to understand the issues that they face. There's too much do this, because if you don't, you're going to get done and your business will go. Doesn't matter why, just do us on top. Pay me another $5 a head every month and another $5. And this month, well, yeah, I know we've got that, but now we want this one, and that's another $5. Yeah. And I think there's an inherent distrust in that. It's like selling insurance, isn't it, to some extent? Until such a time as you've had a breach, you don't understand the value of actually having security in the first place. So, there's a massive education job to be done from vendors and MSPs. But, in my mind, vendors don't understand how to educate, the people who are actually using it and paying everybody's salary. Because the bloke at the end who is using it is the only one that's actually paying all the way up the stack everybody's salary, and he's the one that's actually treated the worst in many respects. So I think there's a big education job to do there, but in the overall scheme of things, as I say, genuinely, I just think there's a specialism. You can grow within a vertical, you can add value, and you become under less threat. And in the UK, I know people who are charging everything from £70 a seat to £210 a seat per month, and everything in between, because they've established their knowledge in that market, and they've got some extra bits that are particular to that, to their own particular market
Relevance.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. It's also expertise.
Yeah.
Right? It's reliability. It's transparency. It's all those things.
Yeah. And if you're talking their language, then they'll listen to you and they'll pay an extra bit.
Yep.
Yeah.
The size of the extra, I guess, is the question then. How much? But you can prove value. I mean, a long time ago, I worked for Fujitsu, and they tried to introduce a sort of a value-based pricing mechanism where you shared the benefit. So you'd do a proposal for, and then you'd have an outcome, and then you'd get paid on the basis of that outcome. So you could do lots, or you could have a bath and not a lot in between. And they tried that for probably about 18 months. And just didn't get anywhere with it, because all the people that you're talking to were suspicious, because you were so confident that you were going to deliver the outcome that they were all suspicious in the first place. And it did help that then they go, well, what's the real price? And you you could step back off that and get them to agree to pay, ordinarily, as it were.
Yeah.
But it's different. I think it's different price for different markets and different sizes. I work with a lot of small MSPs, and they say, what's your target market? And they go from 50 to 250.
Very different businesses.
I see you've got absolutely no chance of winning an account of 250 seats. If you look at the competition in that market, it's just not going to happen. So, and at 25 to 50, in my mind, you're just slightly over the commodity. So you've got an opportunity to add some value, but not masses, but something to differentiate yourself. And then as you go beyond that, your added value to the company should be significant. And of course, what we used to do was we'd sell the fact that we'd got a help desk of 35 people in the office, and it was front-ended by the people who were on site with the people that we supported. So you might only see one, but you've got 35 brains that sit behind that, and then they've all been trained. So, we would swap out the people that were there so that we could keep them up to date with training and swap them all around, which, if you're an employer, you can't do that.
Yeah. Well, Rob, you touched on commoditization, and you again here touched on niches and delivering value or creating value. And I think there's an interesting challenge in that the industry itself has kind of guided MSPs to standardize, to become operationally mature, to reduce complexity in the offerings that they have, in the pricing models. And so that kind of leads them down the path of getting a very, very repetitive type of ICP of client base, because otherwise it's inevitable to have to customize a little bit of that delivery, of that go-to-market. But I think the reality is always very far from, the ideal. And in this case, MSPs have come in from a small shop and grown, and they have customers that are on all sorts of spectrums of that growth profile. They have sometimes 10-seat customers, sometimes 80 or 100-seat customers. And the sameness of the approach tends to create a lot of friction for customers on either end of that spectrum. And so one of the things I've been thinking a lot about is this idea that because we were so tactically and technically focused 20 years ago, just deploy the servers, deploy the workstations, I think a lot of the pricing model evolution kind of stalled there a little bit, in the sense that MSPs haven't really thought about pricing for a strategic engagement necessarily. And so I want to ask you guys a little bit of your thoughts on this idea of how do MSPs get more intentional about pricing for strategy? This is where a lot of the budgetary stuff falls down. They haven't priced for strategy. Those charging the 70 pounds a seat probably can't deliver the level of strategic engagement, QBR or what have you, that requires, to deliver a proper strategy and engagement at that kind of level. Meanwhile, the 210 pound a seat MSP is probably doing a really good job of that strategic engagement. So I'm just curious on your thoughts as guys that have been around the block, some of this maybe hesitancy to price for strategy.
The challenge that most of them face is they're technical people who have set up a business. In some cases, they're not even sure why they've got a business, but it's just kind of happened. And with all due deference to you gentlemen, there's an awful lot of American software companies that drive standardization because that helps them sell more, as opposed to the MSP sell more. So I think there's an awful lot of sort of insular looking at tools and looking at different, because that's their background, that's what they're comfortable with. And, there's umpteen software companies offering umpteen tools, and they drive them down. What they don't think about is, what does the client want? So instead of coming back to you guys and going, this is what my clients want, they're listening to you saying, this is what your clients want. Mm-hmm. And that dichotomy, in some respects, is where they have an issue, because it doesn't, in my mind, and so I've been a sales director for 35 years, and everything for me is about a number. I wouldn't want his job for all the money in the world, but it's all about a number. And so when I talk to them about a number and going out to sell things, as opposed to sitting back and waiting for people to come and buy off me, they look at me like I've got two heads. And then it's, well, we got this tool and we got that tool. And I recently did an event and I spoke to a vendor who will remain nameless, but I wanted to be able to produce a small service that was low risk, low cost, but they could sell to anybody to get in through the door and actually then, develop a relationship from the inside. And I kid you not, this is the national sales manager said to me, what we've got is this new tool which will give them more time on their help desk to be able to then start looking for new clients. And I went, I don't think you're listening to me. What I need is, I'm doing a presentation and I want to have a Trojan. I want a low cost, low risk, so that it's easy to sell out. Yeah, but if they've got more time, they can look for more new clients. And in the end, I cut the call short. And I spoke to, as it was, a distributor, and I said, am I talking gibberish? Because this guy hasn't got a clue what I'm talking about, because his whole message is internal tools. Yeah. And, whether it's Datto or Kaseya or whatever they're called today, or, ConnectWise, that all drives that way. And they're relatively naive business people. And that's the way that, they're being driven. I mean, some of them are larger and some of them, but I don't know many MSPs that are, sufficiently structured to go out and sell things, which you both need them to do. Because if they don't go out and sell things, they're not buying more of what you're selling.
Agreed. Rob, do you have any comments on that? Because
I've got a few. First of all, it's funny how he's blaming two Canadians for American technology. But
okay, well, at this point, then I'll apologize to both of you.
Which part of Australia are you from?
There's no need for that. I'm sorry, you just all sound the same to me.
Oh.
That's a terrible thing to say. But I'm a big fan of Mark Carney, if that makes you feel.
Oh, good. All right. Most Brits are. I think you should name the vendor.
No.
No. I tried to make it a little, like you said, spicy. Yeah. So a couple different things. I absolutely 100% agree with you, and I've lived my entire IT career on the vendor side. And, if you think about what vendors are trying to do, they're not thinking about your end user. They're thinking about you. They just want you to consume more things. And, for a number of years, and still some vendors use this, hey, buy all my stuff and you have a single pane of glass, like that kind of vision and hope for you, that kind of stuff. I learned this a long time ago, working for vendors. I need to put myself into your shoes. I need to put myself into you, and I need to give you messaging on how to position this to your end users. So, and I don't think enough vendors actually do that. And, again, I'll use the backup company as an example, where it's just like, just buy more gigs, buy more petabytes, buy more terabytes, all that kind of stuff. Like, it was all about that because that's how we got paid. But you're not the ultimate consumer of this technology. You're just selling it. So a lot of vendors need to think about their MSPs as their sales force and train them as if you would your sales force. You invest in them, you educate them, you help them out, you give them objection handling models, you give them, all the value props, the new value adds.
Cisco and Microsoft have been doing with the, what I would class as the proper channel, but the bigger businesses for the last 30 years.
Yes. Yeah. But then training the channel as if you were selling this almost in a direct relationship. So, the backup company, we switched around rather than focusing on how many petabytes, terabytes, whatever you had. We focused it and said, the conversation you need to have with your end users is about downtime and the cost of downtime. And here's how you have that conversation. RTO, RPO, here's a tool that you can use to demonstrate cost of downtime to your end user. Here's how you turn that into a value prop sale. I'm going to save you X, Mr. or Mrs. End User, and that is going to cost you Y. And then all of a sudden, your margins get significantly better on the technologies that you're selling. You and the service that you provide to the ultimate end users is better, and therefore they're willing to pay more. I don't think there's nearly enough of that, and I think it's an MSP problem. Like, not MSPs like as that. It's an MSP industry, including the vendor problem, where there isn't enough attention or focus on the soft skills around this. It's all about tech and tech innovation. It's all about the newest feeds and speeds, the newest kind of innovation, which is important.
But that's what.
But how do you demonstrate that?
So the difficulty is that, of course, that because these are technical people that you talk to,
Yes.
that becomes their comfort blend.
Yes.
So you talk technology to them, they buy technology from you. What they fail to appreciate is that their accountant doesn't buy tech.
Correct.
And there isn't enough, if we use Datto as an example, but Datto going, this is why we should be doing this in accountants. These are all the things accountants look for.
Absolutely.
And we tick all these boxes. So if you're selling to accountants, deliver this. Yeah. And I mean, as I say, I did this. I mean, eventually I came up with something for it, but previously I'd done a whole kind of, again, a talk on winning accounts, and I used a DMARC solution, and it's, 15 quid a month or something. And so, I built a whole thing around making £100,000 from a DMARC solution, and go and talk to your prospects and your clients about DMARC, because the chances are others aren't, and then just simply go in with, this early thing. And I'd got the following day, the distributor that I was working with signed up 6 new partners for the solution, because I've said, there's the solution, this is the requirement, this is the route, and this is how much you can make. And it just it was very simple. I mean, it's Mickey Mouse in some respects, but that's what, collectively you're not doing. And, you talk and it goes over their heads. There's an assumption that these people can take your solutions and translate it into the requirements of their clients.
Well, not only can they translate it, but there's also an assumption that they are good at doing that as well, which, I mean, again, not really. I've built a pretty good career in IT. I suck at IT. I can't even turn my laptop on some days and can't figure it out. Where my value add has been listening to MSPs, talking to a lot of MSPs, and then sharing that collective information back on, hey, here's something that's working, here's something that's not. Here's how you position this, here's how you sell this, here's even potentially in some cases how you price it. For me, it hasn't been about the speeds and feeds, but you're right. A lot of vendors tend to default towards the speed and feed conversation or what's new, because that's the easy conversation you can have. The more difficult one is teaching the MSP how to demonstrate that for an accountant or a lawyer.
And your end users buy outcome.
Yeah.
So they're not buying technology. What they're buying is an outcome.
Yeah.
And, all of these businesses, they've got something to offer these end users from an outcome perspective, but it's not couched in that way. And they're constantly, and this is, the issue for me with security is that wide, and they're sort of slicing it. Whereas if they just sat down and explained the breaches this week, what happened, and how those companies could have avoided that happening. Nothing else. Just, we had Marks and Spencers, we've had Jaguar cars and all these things, which your average accountant doesn't relate to, but in the community, there are accountants being done. And, so let's talk about what happened. No, I'm not going to frighten you, but this is what happened. And they didn't have X, Y, and Z, and they could have done this, and they could have done some training on not opening emails and they don't know where they're coming from. But that's an outcome. And, and again, vendors, and it's never been any different really, but vendors are pushing there, but they're not giving the tools and the support to be able to take that next step for them to become, the expert in a particular market.
And that is worth way more than
absolutely.
a per device type model.
Well, let me ask you guys, because I think there's perhaps a maturity model gap, and I'll explain. MSPs and the entrance into the industry happens at all parts of the spectrum. A lot of accidental one-man shops growing to 2 or 3 and then to 5, 8, 10, and so on. And then there's also obviously the larger MSPs that have built out middle management. They have decent operations and so on. And I think it's interesting that even the small 2-3 person shop is often comparing themselves to these larger MSPs and wondering that, why am I not doing that? Is this what I should be doing? And similarly with cybersecurity, there's only so much a 2-person shop can really do insofar as the depth of security, the depth of coverage. And this doesn't happen only with cybersecurity. It happens with the ability to have strategic level conversation with clients, to engage them in a true value outcome alignment type of delivery. And so I'm wondering what you guys think about, have we kind of tried to standardize too much? And is that proving to be an enemy to the ability to play well at the maturity model size that you currently are, the types of clients you're working with, and then creating knowledge or education around the pivots necessary to move into the next phase and the next phase and the next phase? Rob?
I think you're onto something there. I think we back in the day trying to figure out that, the transformation from reseller to MSP model, everybody was trying to figure out how to price this stuff out. And we kind of built a poor foundation. And I think we've just been rebuilding on that same foundation, or just kind of patching up that foundation since the beginning. And I think it almost is going to require at this particular point, because I do think the managed services market, the managed service providers are more mature and adding more value than ever before. Maybe it's time we have to relook at the, the way in which we built this and have kind of been building on top of it. Maybe it's time to take another look at that, because
nuke and pave.
I think you have to, right? It's kind of at that point. And when we look at the sophistication of what MSPs are doing, the value compared to even 5 years ago of what they're doing, it's game-changing stuff. And I do agree with you. And this goes back to, what is the right pricing model? Smaller MSPs can still work on a per head, a consumption type model. But I think that the better model, and of course the larger MSPs have the ability to do the value prop. I think there's one key to it all though. And I think the MSPs that I see that win are the ones that have complete transparency in their pricing. You're going to pay more from me because I am doing this much more. My price is going to go up because I'm adding these pieces to what it is that you're doing, or we're increasing your cybersecurity prowess, something along those lines. Transparency and then constant review of it, I think, is going to be critical. And I think that's kind of the starting point. We're also seeing, just even the types of end users that we're dealing with are completely changing. There was this kind of sweet spot of small, medium businesses that would outsource IT. Now we're seeing larger organizations outsourcing portions of IT, co-managed deals. how do you price that? Like, you don't want to go in it at the same way that you would go in at a different one. And I do agree with you on verticalization. I don't think you have to be 100% verticalized, but I do think that verticalization also helps, because there are specific verticals that have a propensity to spend more as a result. But it's amazing to me, two comments about what you said. One, how many MSPs come to me and just say, I'm just a small MSP, and then I'll find out how big they are, and they're generally above average. It's just everybody just assumes that they're just a small MSP, right? And generally they're not. I don't think they necessarily understand that this entire community is small businesses, right? I mean, that's what we are. I mean, sure, we've got vendors that are, making billions of dollars now, but they still have to act and think like small businesses in order to do that. I think the other problem that MSPs have, again, is they also, on top of this inferiority complex of being too small, they also compare themselves too much to each other. And you can't. I know plenty of MSPs, and I can't probably put two together and say you are very much alike, because there's different skill sets based on the staff that you've got, the education that they have, all those types of things. So, I know we're making this probably way more complicated than it needs to be and throwing a whole bunch of variables here, but
I think it is. I mean, I think the co-managed thing, I mean, I don't think, and I might be wrong, it's just the people that I deal with, but I don't think the co-managed in the UK is anywhere near as large as it is in the States. But, it's kind of what we did years ago, really.
Yeah.
I had this whole team in Oracle, but we reported to, their IT director.
Yep.
And that is it's no easy ride. And certainly if you haven't got anybody who's had experience of working in that larger type of environment, but the only way for me to price it is based on the cost of the resource.
Yeah.
So you're doing a resource costing exercise, and we would look at the people that we needed, and I suppose typically we would charge twice what we're paying them for them to be on site.
Yeah.
And then anything that sits around that would be just added as an additional cost. So we've got a list of sort of additional things. There's no way then, or I can't see a way now, that you would structure that against numbers of users or whatever, because it's not about that.
Right.
And I'm always slightly apprehensive when I've actually got a client at the moment who's bidding for 120 seats. And if we take what they charge monthly per seat and multiply it by 120, it's a very large number. And I'm saying, I think we need to look at this differently. Let's look at it almost from a resource perspective.
Mm-hmm.
What do we need to do to support these businesses, rather than it being an ad hoc seat price? Yeah. And I mean, it's an argument I'm losing, because, at the end of the day, it's his business. So it's his decision. But when you get to that sort of volume, you've got to look at a more holistic sort of, overall view of the department, and be big enough to say, we're taking out your IT department, which would normally have cost you an IT manager at 70 grand a year, and two of these and four of these and one of those. And, we're doing that for you at 2/3 of the price.
Whatever cost.
you would agree though that still needs to be a recurring revenue model.
Yeah, I mean, it needs then, historically we would have done it on the basis of paying annually in advance.
Right.
But, whether it's, monthly, quarterly, it's got to be paid in advance, and it's got to be regular. And, clearly you've got to have proper T's and C's in place, because I did a turnaround for an MSP that had won an 800 seat contract. And I don't believe they won it without brown envelopes. Let's just leave it at that.
Green envelopes?
Brown envelopes. So cash.
Got it.
But it should never have happened. I mean, the company that awarded it should never have done it. And the company that had it should never have taken it. And I got involved in the middle of it after the whole thing had gone west. And they were having to pay contractors to come in and do the job, because they hadn't got anybody that ever had the understanding of anything of that sort of size. And it's just symptomatic. And if you come down even 120 seats, in this particular instance, the guys in this business have never, ever managed an estate of that sort of number. They've got a couple of hundreds and they've got a couple of 80s. But I think, it's that holistic, this is what a department, sketch out a department for the client. This is what you would normally need. And now, we'll do it for, I mean, typically it's 2/3 of the price if if you work all the numbers through, and then, by all means, then charge it on a monthly or a quarterly, sort of forward basis.
Is this recent?
I've got literally the 120 seats is happening as we speak.
Well, but the 800
Oh,
seat
the
would
800
probably crush them, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it was, I went in, and because I've got sort of some experience a while ago of doing these things, and I'd just go like this. And then we got to try and unpick it. And in the end, I had to go in and say, look, we've got to cancel this, because if not, the actual company, the providing MSP would have just gone down the tubes. It was killing their business. And the owner really thought he'd won the pools.
Yeah.
He'd won the, when he,
And that's an interesting challenge, again, going back to this perhaps self-orientation that MSPs tend to lead with, that have led with over the last 20 years, and finding themselves now needing to switch back to what does the client need? What does the client want? And are we able to meet them where they are? I think they would have been able to answer that question
absolutely
a lot more clearly if they had taken the time to understand, as opposed to just, jackpot type of thing, right?
I recently upset somebody who disconnected with me on LinkedIn and did all the things he could possibly do, because I wrote a post on LinkedIn that said SMEs should not be dealing with one-man band MSPs who work in a shed in their garden. If you're serious about your business and you're serious about what you're doing, then you shouldn't be doing that. And there's a guy that I know who works, it's not a shed, but he's got an office in his garden, and he's a one-man band. And he got really bent out of shape over this and started ringing people and see if they agreed with me. And of course, all the people with an office agreed with me, and all the people without an office didn't agree with me.
Of course.
But, my point was that there's a marketplace that he can serve. And I would say it's one-man band companies, or, twos and threes, that he can build up over time and work from there. But for him to bother sort of trying to win 15 seats and 20 seats, and he says, well, of course you can do it, but that's not the point. If I'm, the manager or the owner of a business that's got 25 members of staff, am I really going to let you look after everything for me? It's not going to happen, is it?
Yeah.
And that, again, it's that sort of, they get this mismatch because they're being told all the time, you don't need an office, you can do this, you can all do, you don't need engineers, you can outsource it all and
buy my tool and it will change your life.
Well, now we know the real definition of garden variety MSP, right? I think we've learned something today. Well, the moment everybody's probably been waiting for is when we drop the AI bomb into this conversation, to see how AI is maybe forcing MSPs to rethink some of their pricing models. And I've already seen articles where big consulting firms, the likes of Lloyd and so on, are being taken, to court because the efficiency that they gained through AI suddenly meant the client didn't have the same value alignment. It's like, well, we're paying for all this time and all this effort, and you're going on a line and on LinkedIn and boasting about all these efficiencies and how you're spending half the time on all your projects, but you're still charging us the same. And this is one of those classic misalignment of business outcomes with the value being delivered. So I'm curious, what you're starting to hear about or see MSPs in the struggle of understanding whether AI is going to create a problem to them to communicate that value with clients.
Yeah, I'm slightly cynical, right? So I'm not saying at all AI isn't going to happen, because that would be foolish sitting where I'm sitting. But it's not going to happen, I don't believe, as quickly as lots of people who sell things that are based on AI would like it to. If you go back over time, we've had lots of, sort of over the history of the industry, lots of things that come along that are going to turn the whole thing on its head, which take a long time to deliver.
Yeah, to filter.
I do think that the core basic support is going to disappear from the MSPs, because it will be covered by AI. And, as I said earlier, really, I don't see any reason why Microsoft or HP or any of the major vendors aren't just simply building a platform using AI to do that sort of support and negate that from the MSPs.
Well, and they might.
Piece.
And, there's this AWS effect. I hear about hundreds of businesses that go out of business when Amazon launches one feature at their reInvent conference. And this is the kind of thing that Microsoft is very much in the position to do. with the SMB customer, the SME customer, kind of demanding more stuff that works right out of the box. If they can solve a lot of their own problems with AI coaches and AI PCs and AI this and the other thing, yeah, it's going to create a gap for the MSPs. And this is a bit of the pivot we're seeing to better deliver strategic engagement and not just be focused on this, tactical engagement.
I did this event the other week, and we asked the question of, we got 40 odd MSPs in the room. How many of you are using AI? And of course, they're all using it in one way, shape or form. And then I said, so how many of you have actually implemented anything for the benefit of your clients? And there was one hand. And the guy said that they've built an AI solution for solicitors to be able to take all of the casework and documentation and summarize it. So from a solicitor's perspective, they can take all of the sort of paperwork, summarize it, look at the summary, and then dig into it rather than having to read it all and go the other way. And they've implemented it with one of their accounts. So I just went, so you're now going around all the other solicitors in your area and actually promoting that? And he went, no.
Why?
Why? And I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah.
But it's going to have a major impact over time. I just think that the people at the moment are living in this year. All the people that are laying lots of people off are all the people that have got some reason to do it. Now, my daughter works for Salesforce, and Salesforce have got their own AI, and they're supposedly laying loads of people off because of AI. I mean, they're just going through their normal annual cull of people and calling it AI because they're selling AI to all their clients, and Microsoft the same, and all these people. So,
Rob, let me reframe the question a little bit for the answer I want to elicit from you.
Because you didn't get it.
No, it's your situation with Pax8, I think, is an interesting one too, because Pax8's building an agentic marketplace, and I think there's an interesting level of attention to quote unquote prepackaged AI solutions, if you will.
Sure.
And one of the things that I've been kind of tossing around as an idea is that it has maybe the possibility of setting some MSPs back into a VAR mentality, because rather than consulting with clients and working through their issues, and again, this is a maturity model problem because a two-person shop may not be able to do that if they're focused heavily on support and infrastructure and some of the other things as well. But a marketplace of agentic solutions might it's like an easy button potentially to just find more things to resell. And so I've been kind of concerned that MSPs are going to have to make a decision and go either down the truly strategic engagement consultative route, or they might find themselves just, what's around the corner that I can just, repackage and sell to my customers. And I'm curious if you're seeing conversations around that and how that's affecting a bit of the pricing model conversation.
Yeah, that's fair. I think, back to what you're saying, I think there is, we still have to wait and see. I don't think anybody really has the answer as far as what value add the managed service provider or even some vendors or some of this AI tools that are coming up. I mean, how many new AI tools have we seen walking around this conference, right? It's a little difficult right now to kind of put your finger on what's going to work, what's not going to work, where are we going to be interested. I think back to I did a panel in CompTIA probably about 10 years ago, and they said, here's who the 5 hottest IT techs that we need to pay attention to in the next 12 months. And it was like 5G and IoT and big data and like things that just never really, drones was on that list. Like it just never really came to fruition to the extent that everybody's like, this is the big game changer for the channel. I do think AI is different. I do think AI will have its place here. I think that this whole notion that large vendors will want to serve, even with AI, want to serve this channel, the SMEs, I don't think that's a thing. I really don't. And I think is the part of the value add from a vendor perspective of the MSP channel is the relationships that they have with their end users. I had an opportunity to sit down with a pretty smart analyst before I came here, and consistently, at least right now, and this may change over the course of time, but right now, end users are interested but weary with AI. Fast forward a year from now, they're probably in the idea of how can AI help improve productivity, efficiency, all those types of things. but they want it from their MSP. They don't want to work with these vendors directly. They just, because there's a certain level of trust. There's a certain level of who do I call if things go sideways. There's a certain level of who's going to come and meet with me on a monthly, quarterly basis to talk about what's next, what's new, especially as we're going through this change. And God bless Microsoft, but they're not going to show up to your local town to have a conversation with that small business user about changes that are happening from an AI perspective. So I do think that we have a pretty long runway of still tech support being handled. I think the MSPs will have AI modules and agents themselves that are doing that, but with a zero out option to come to an actual MSP and talk to a live human being, at least until the younger generations come up and really, really take advantage of that. What we're trying to do with the AI is just trying to get people ready, and thinking about it, back to your question, because the businesses is going to transform, the pricing is going to transform, the way in which we consume, the vendors that we're actually consuming, like all of this is going to change probably faster than we've ever seen it before. I think that those are probably safe bets. I think that and it goes back to the original conversation of why we're all here right now is to talk about pricing. The way in which we price things is going to completely change. And I think right now we're kind of at this stage in the channel where we have to, it's more about getting ready. I vision this, and, I love analogies, but this is like we're going to trek through the jungle here, and we're going down a path that nobody's ever been down before. You don't just run into the jungle and go, you got to prep for it. And I think that's where we're at the stage right now is prepping for it. The word of caution is every vendor is going to say, buy this tool, and now you're an AI provider. Like that is, we saw the same thing with security. Buy this EDR, and now you're MSSP. Like we have to be weary that we don't kind of fall into those pits, and instead look at it from the holistic perspective. But this is, in my mind, it is all going to change, and then even from there, it starts evolving from there with other tech that we're going to see wrapped around AI.
You guys both mentioned transparency and pricing to some extent. Do you think AI will cause pricing transparency to suffer a little bit in these initial stages, while there's maybe a gap of understanding, what MSPs know versus what the SMB or SME client knows?
I think there will be, until somebody decides that they're going to drop the price because they get an efficiency from AI, and then everybody will follow suit. Now, what tends to happen in the first instance is the early adopters will maintain and make more margin, and then somebody goes, floors the price, and then everybody else has to follow suit.
Yeah, there has to be some value prop beyond plug this in, here's your results, and now you don't need me anymore. There needs to be some more than just that,
which is their future.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
It's funny the example you use about the solicitors, the AI product that built for solicitors kind of idea, and then not thinking like, we should go around and sell this to every solicitor in the market. We're coming across examples like that everywhere, especially when it comes to verticalization, where there is some level of customization. I actually had two MSPs side by side in the US just recently. Both of them serve the construction industry. One is actually leaning quite heavily in AI and doing some pretty creative things from a efficiency perspective. The other one's like, oh no, construction guys won't buy this. And it's like, it's amazing how the two of them are kind of serving the same market, relatively in the same geo, yet they have completely different views themselves and what their end users are ultimately saying to them about this. It's, I think it's just early days. I still think it's too early to speculate on where it's all going to go. But I again, don't think it's anything that we could ignore. And again, let's all get prepped for the journey.
But it's about building those kind of small applications that save lots of time and delivering it to your target market to say, and, when we did this, it was all about winning new accounts, but he's got an opportunity there to go to all the solicitors. And if he only did nothing more than demonstrate and show them and disrupt their relationship with their current supplier, then, he's going in the right direction. But seriously, he just goes, I hadn't thought of it.
But see, it starts with that too, and then will potentially lead to other business, more maybe to the traditional MSP type services, right? I guess, you said it, where it's like, kind of the first one to take this to that market is ultimately going to at least win on the surface, like initially. I always find it's usually the second in tends to win longer term. the first in tends to, get in there, and all of a sudden everybody's excited, and then that kind of, dust settles and figures it out. But I think that just coming across those examples, sharing those examples, that's one of the strengths of this community as well, is the fact that something that's like, you're in this group, you guys are having this conversation, somebody has shared with you a win. Somebody else in that room is going to duplicate it potentially for another vertical that they're working on, at which point then we're all doing it, we're all sharing, we're all, moving forward.
It's the blessing and the curse, the sameness also ensues, of course. And I think this is part of the challenge that creates and drives commoditization. But let me ask you a question about, in the spirit of knowing what things not to do, I think that's an important way that MSPs can more successfully communicate where they play. Because sometimes we're quick to say as MSPs, oh yeah, we can do this, we can do that, we can do the other thing, but never take a moment to say, these are the things we don't do. And I think there's a lot of transparency and clarity in doing that. From a pricing perspective, I'd love your guys' advice on what things MSPs should not do when it comes to pricing. Because I think everybody has advice on what they should do. But few people stop to think about, what to avoid.
I think they need to keep it simple and transparent. I mean, I worked for a number of years and in the enterprise space where we were working on cost plus. So we literally declared all of our costs and agreed a margin. And, I'd like to say we were 100% transparent on all occasion, but, given half a chance, we'd shuffle some money down, but we'd actually go and open the books and go, this is what it cost, this is the people in, and we agree cost plus 5 or cost plus 10, so we've got no risk of loss and we've only got upside. And you're signing up, and you've got to be prepared to have your books audited and all sorts if you're going to do that. But there's no reason why with the smallers, they couldn't adopt that type of attitude and go to people and say, look, this is what it's going to cost me. We just want a sensible margin. And any businessman, person, woman understands that we got to make money.
Yes, of course.
There's nobody going to go, well, I only want that for cost, because that doesn't make any sense. So
no, nobody was do business.
There's a sensible margin in it. Then it's trust. Then you've got the trust of somebody, and from a defensive point of view, anybody going in there, they're going to say, well, this is how we operate. Do you want to do the same?
Yeah. Rob, pricing advice, right answers only?
I had the same simple, transparent, right? Being able to demonstrate it, being able to explain it. So mistakes, not reviewing your pricing on at least an annual basis. Because things change, the cost of things change. Some things go up, some things go down. Maybe you want to upgrade your talent. That's going to cost a little bit more. Maybe you need some additional certifications. Maybe now you're starting to have compliance and even deeper cybersecurity conversations. I think the other mistake MSPs make as well is kind of treating everybody the same. If you think about, do some type of cybersecurity assessment of each of your end users, you're going to find not everybody is the same, but also their willingness for risk is not the same either. And those that want or are willing to handle more risk, either, we see a lot of MSPs walking away from that business more so than leaning into it, but that might be, an extra cost because there's some additional work that's going to happen when the breach does, or somebody that's willing to spend a little bit more to stay a little bit more secure. I think the other mistake MSPs make, you really have to understand your cost of doing business. A lot of times, and I think this goes back to the tradition where here's a box, add 20 points, and that's how I make money. That doesn't work anymore. You have to understand your cost of labor. You have to understand office space. You have to understand all the costs it is of doing business. The average MSP is selling probably, I think it's 12 different vendors, but the actual business itself is working with 35 different vendors between payroll companies and, banks and accountants and lawyers and all that kind of stuff. All of that stuff needs to be factored in. So, a big fan of kind of reverse engineering. What's the cost of doing business, reverse that out, and then understanding your true cost of doing business, and then adding, like you said, a reasonable margin to that. But again, revisit it every single year as well, because things do change a lot, especially these days.
Oh, definitely. And I think one of the things that's changing, by the way, is effectively the currency that MSPs are selling. I think, we were selling the currency of productivity perhaps 10, 20 years ago. And now we're definitely in the currency of security and risk. And I think this is an interesting shift with AI, which obviously has its own cybersecurity and risk issues. There may be sort of yet another pivot to currency changes down the line, which is, productivity is not the same as efficiency necessarily. So maybe AI brings about an efficiency currency. And I'm curious to ask you guys your thoughts on what, in 2030, what might be the currency that MSPs are transacting on?
I think it's efficiency, and it's, it should be helping their clients to grow and develop using technology. And to do that, they've got to understand it all and deliver it and be able to explain it. But in the context of the security, I mean, I don't know who it is that tells them to run away if somebody doesn't want to be secure. I mean, my attitude is just make sure that you've got something written that explains what their risks are, and then have a mediation plan, which, and deliver that. Don't run away from it, because not everybody buys insurance, do they?
Well, but what happens when that breach happens? Who gets blamed?
Well, this is the point, is if you're clear about what it is that you're responsible for, and you get them to, there needs an agreement in place. And then when there's a breach, we agreed that I'm not covering that. So that's $5,000, remediation.
But you're talking about liability. What about your brand? What about your, because they're still going to look for somebody to blame.
The insurance company may give them no choice, right? The insurance company
that's very true.
May find them at fault and decide that's who they're going to go after to get paid, right?
Yeah.
I just think that there's a lot of businesses that haven't been educated sufficiently well to believe that they need it in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely.
And just by walking away from them is actually not doing them a service.
No, that's totally fair.
And it's opportunity that you manage and you develop and you get them to understand over time. It doesn't all happen straight away, does it? You don't walk in somewhere and go, I'm a really nice bloke, give me all your business. And they go, oh, that'd be lovely. Yeah, there you go. You've got to sort of build that level of trust as you go along.
There also has to be a level of seriousness that these businesses are going to take. And there are some that just don't. You can't fix stupid.
Okay, so your currency in 2030 is efficiency. Rob, would you agree, or do you have a different take?
I think efficiency is what's going to drive it, but I think ultimately the way in which we bill and get paid is going to be on per outcome. I'm going to save you X amount of dollars per year, and as a result of the assessment of doing that, B, the ongoing management of that, here's what my fee will be, and I think it's a demonstrable. Here's how much money I'm going to save you. Here's how much efficiency we're going to find in this business, and here's the continued services that are going to have wrapped around that. I think it's per outcome.
Well, since we're talking about insurance, and maybe we'll use this to wrap up the conversation, cyber insurance is a great example of something that has very, very interesting dynamic pricing built into the risks that are inherent in the business that they are underwriting for. And so do you feel like there is a world in which MSPs have algorithmic pricing or dynamic pricing based on the profile of customers, and that there's, potentially a way to do this automatically that incents the customer to actually drive some cybersecurity profile improvement and things like this?
Let me tack on to that, because I'll let you answer this first, but do we trust the insurance companies can actually do that, or will do that with the best intentions in mind?
I mean, I think the answer, I guess, is yes, but I can't see it happening.
Yeah.
Because again, there's a trust element, isn't there? And, I think in terms of pricing by outcome and all those things, it will go that way. I mean, again, I had some sort of experience of doing that, but it would take a lot more than your average MSP's owner to negotiate that deal in the first place.
Yep.
And truly get a balanced view of it all. But, I think if you take away I want to say boring stuff, but the kind of, the baseline support piece, then they ought to be able to price things relatively straightforward for projects and such like.
Yep.
Because, if we do this, we'll deliver this. And then, and actually do it and build the reputation on that basis, rather than, if we do this, we'll save you this. And then we actually never go back to that, just in case we haven't delivered what we said.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, those robots are going to need updating. They're going to need patches.
Yeah.
Somebody's going to have to be there to do it.
The agents will need an LLM refresh.
Yes.
Yeah. Their data sets will be updated.
Yeah.
Well, a fascinating conversation indeed. Rob Ray from Paxade, Paul Lloyd, thank you so much for joining me to have this little bit of a debate on pricing models. It's going to be continuously evolving in my mind, and I don't think we need to make up our minds about what's the good thing or the bad thing, but rather just talk to customers, let them tell you to some extent.
But that's it, isn't it? I mean, we're all sort of used to doing that. But at the end of the day, you speak to clients, you speak to prospects, you learn, you develop, and you do what they want you to do, given that you can make some money out of it.
Absolutely.
It's not exactly a rocket science, is it? But if you sit back just reading lots of industry press and looking at all the stuff coming out of the industry, then you're getting a completely warped view of what's happening in the real world.
Yeah, that's very true.
Rob, final thoughts?
I mean, that was perfect. It goes back, don't compare yourself to others, try to figure out what your value add is, continue to try to improve that value add. Don't be shy. I find, we're too shy about our pricing in this industry. We don't even value enough of what we do and the knowledge that we have. I guess we just assume that, everybody out there knows just as much as we do, but we don't. And the skill sets that we have are incredibly valuable. And I think sometimes we don't charge enough for that.
Well said. Well, thank you, gentlemen. And thank you to MSP Global and Acronis for hosting us to have this conversation. We're here just in the outskirts of Barcelona doing this wonderful conference. And so thank you again. We'll see you out on the road, as I'm sure I will you.
Yes.
And take care, everybody. We'll talk to you all soon.
Thanks, Doug.
Thank you.